Good evening. My name is Tom, and I live in Oakland, California, and Southwest Airlines got me here without any problems or difficulties today, and I was grateful for that. Thank you for your invitation. It's kind of fun to come to Reno. I grew up in San Jose, and we'd come up to Tahoe once or twice a year when I was a boy during the Eisenhower years. And we'd oftentimes come to Reno and look around and gawk, and my folks like slot machines and Virginia City and stuff. So I have some lovely memories of the Bucket of Blood Saloon and a few other things that give you that certain kind of je ne sais quoi, as we would say. So thank you. And I'm glad to come back, and I'm glad to share some recovery, and I know there are some folks here I've known over the many years. I'm in my 71st year, and I've been in Al-Anon for somewhere between 25 and 30 years. It's hard to know sometimes because you're in and out and in and out and in and out. At least a lot of us are. It's kind of like not smoking, you know. You don't remember if you're not smoking, or have you just slipped, or does this cigarette count for being a smoker again? It's kind of like that. And you finally have to wear out enough to get here and consider yourself a member of the, as my Al-Anon mentor Blanche would say, the worldwide fellowship of Al-Anon. So I'm glad to share some experience, strength, and hope. I don't know if you've noticed, but the whole world has gone crazy. And Al-Anon principles are desperately needed in a variety of ways. And it's the holidays, which I was telling Mark, I'm really not even ready for Thanksgiving. And I have a thing in me that loves the excitement of being late. There's adrenaline there, you know. It's the kind of thing when I was a little boy, it's Sunday night, and Bonanza is over, which is another little moment of Reno, you know, the Ponderosa. I know they were here. It's time to do the book report. And it's due tomorrow morning, and it's just awful. So stress and excitement and being under the gun and being late are things that can make me perform very well. And that's fine when you're 10 or 15 or 35, but by the time you're 71, you're really tired. And I have to, part of the Al-Anon program for me is dealing with the tired. I told Jean, who picked me up, you know, I had some time this afternoon, and I slept for a while, and then I got in the worry for the day. You have to get in the worry for the day, and if you don't, everyone you love will fly off the planet. You have to worry, you have to fret, make a couple of phone calls knowing you've dropped something and you can't find it. I mean, all that stuff. So it's living with, you know, unpredictability and what's going to happen next. And there are several different versions of the story going on, and how do you know that? So what I'm doing at this time of the year is I am taking this one day at a time. One of my friends, I am a worrier. You know, I do like worry. It makes me feel that I'm doing something. It makes me think I'm having a relationship with some people if I'm worried about them. So I like worry, and also I do like dread. There is something about dread that focuses me. And from when I was a very young person, if the really awful was just down the street, I felt better. And so one of my Al-Anon pals has told me to dread one day at a time. You don't have to dread the next 3 years or the next 30 years or, oh my God, December 20th. You can just dread today. Because there's so many things you can dread today. And let that be your focus. So I bring that there. And I woke up this morning in Oakland, knowing there were a lot of unpredictable things between leaving, getting out of bed, and arriving here. A lot of things can go wrong. And I pretty much went with the flow. I got on bus number 57. I was a few minutes early. It took me to the MacArthur BART station. I got on the MacArthur BART station. The Fremont train stops by the Coliseum, and you get off there and walk to the Oakland Airport, to the Southwest Station, and you go through security. And on Thursday, late morning, early afternoon, there's not 12 million people with German Shepherds. You can kind of just get through there. And I waited, and I got on the plane, and I did some stuff, and I read a little bit and got in a little worry. And then I found a friend of mine, Father John, who lives here, who's a retired priest for this diocese, and we sat next to each other and visited and drank water. And I got off, and the person welcoming me, Jean, was there to meet me at the airport, although I was pretty sure she would have the wrong day, or be dead, or be drunk, or the car would have exploded, and something would go wrong, and I wouldn't know what to do. So I knew that, and there she was. And then to the hotel, and my name was there, and I had a room. And so I just kind of went, knowing anything could go wrong at any second. And I want you to know, if things do go wrong, I know what to do. I'm from an alcoholic family. We have plan B, and then you have plan C, and you know how to survive and get through the nightmare, you know? So all of those childhood things are very helpful when you're 71. And I made some decisions. I want to string lights outside in our neighborhood in Oakland. It's pretty dark. So yesterday I strung lights. And I live in a community with four other Jesuits. And in Oakland, it's all of the troubles of marriage and none of the joys. But another fellow in my community, three of the five of us are adult children of alcoholics. So that adds its own magic. And one of them has some control issues. He's in charge of recycling, and he does that perfectly. And one night, a while ago, he told me it took him 7 hours to get the recycling right. And my response was, good for you. You keep that up. We depend on your, attention deficit disorder focus. You just keep going. We like this. But last year we had lights up and took the lights down, and I would just throw them all in a big bag because that's my thing. I mean, I have clothes on the floor and stacks of books that could be on a shelf if my mother were there, but she's not, and so they're on the floor. But Steve has all of the lights that functioned were wrapped up individually, so they didn't form that huge web of endless lights, and they were put in individual plastic bags. So all we had to do was find them, and we put out lights, and it was just perfect. And lights are out, and I did some other stuff for Hanukkah, put some lights in the window because I like all the lights, and I'm all for celebrating them. And I felt much better about myself. And then I sat down, and that little bit of dread came up, because what we haven't gotten around to doing anything about yet is a tree. And I want you to know it's okay if we don't. But we might. Last year we lost a little control and had 3. I don't know how that happened. There's part of so here's what I find very helpful for an Al-Anon program, a practical Al-Anon program. When I'm faced with things like the holidays or climate change or fires, what's practical, what's possible, what's simple. And that pulls me a little bit away from the hysteria and a little bit away from the dread and a little bit away from the overwhelm and that wonderful realization that some things might not get done. And it's really okay. So a little bit more on the holidays. As I got into recovery, there were several years I didn't celebrate them at all because I was so family crazy. And then I would go. One year, all alcohol was banned at the house. This is several generations and groups. All alcohol was banned. They thought that would help. And the fact is, it was a very nice evening. My oldest brother wasn't drinking that year, and everyone was on edge. Everyone was on edge. But it was really a very pleasant experience, and I was there for maybe 2 or 3 hours. They lived in Vallejo. I was there for 2 or 3 hours, and I had the realization that I was having a good time with my family, and it made me very anxious. Because that's a surprise. But I relaxed. This is really wonderful. And then I concluded that all my family issues had been resolved. Because the next year you have the holidays again. And it's just because you handled it well last year does not mean you will not be a lunatic this year. We take them one at a time. And I have left family gatherings early because I just couldn't stand it. A couple times I literally ran for my life for a meeting because I couldn't stand it. For a couple years I just didn't show up because I was so crazy. Not them, me. And a couple years ago I have family on the other in Redwood City. These are some wonderful people whom I like very much. And I even agree with them on a whole bunch of things. I couldn't get there. The problem was I thought too much. The thought of getting in the car and driving 40 miles across a bridge freaked me out. And I couldn't go. And I do not consider this a triumph. I consider this a defeat. I overthought myself. Now, you probably have never done that. You probably don't live in your head with a lot of very busy places, and you analyze and reanalyze and think and reanalyze and halfway think the thought. I remember my sponsor would, when I was doing, I'm so busy, he would suggest that I would write the ideas down on a piece of paper. And I'd need many, many pages. I don't have 10,000 ideas running in my head. I have 2.5. But they're going really fast. So I think it's 10,000, So for that, it was, the bridge freaks me out, and I don't want to drive 40 miles. That was the clincher. And the next day, I felt shame. Which I still do on occasion. And I decided that the next year I want to make sure I participate. So, boom. And I did, and it was fine. I don't know what's happening this year yet. How do I get to Al-Anon? Well, I saw a movie 2 or 3 years ago. It's 1952 or 3. Come Back, Little Sheba. It's a classic film on alcoholism. And Burt Lancaster was the most handsome man in North America that year. And he is a sober alcoholic who's getting an acknowledgement for 1 year of sobriety. And it's the first film that shows AA meetings, and they're very serious people, and everybody's wearing a tie, and smoking, of course, because you have to. And Jack Webb runs the meeting, in case you want to know. Lieutenant Joe Friday is running the AA meeting. And Burt Lancaster's wife is Shirley Booth, who we will know as Hazel from the 1970s. She played the maid in that TV series. She's a zany character actress. And she plays a woman married to an unhappy alcoholic, and she has never been to an Al-Anon meeting. And she is the craziest person you've met all year. Nothing but worry and anxiety. Again, two of my favorite themes. Worry and anxiety, and she's so sure that he doesn't like her, and she doesn't have the words for it, and she talks nonstop, and you think you'd have to run for your life at some point. Watch it, and then go immediately to an Al-Anon marathon. Because you'd need it. You see untreated worry, anxiety, low self-esteem, hoping to control everything and feeling very, very out of it. And she called her husband Daddy, which didn't help. So I heard about Al-Anon when I was a bit older, and I knew it had something to do with families, but I thought mostly wives. You know, it was a woman's organization. And I was doing a weekend retreat for people in recovery in San Bernardino, California. I lived in L.A. for 100 years. And Saturday night they had a group meeting. Now at this time, I was sober several years, 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, something like that. And I'm a high school teacher. So I spend the weekend with a bunch of people in recovery, AA, Al-Anon, and Monday to Friday I'm with high school kids. Now, this is not a judgment, but it is an observation. High school kids act exactly like alcoholics. The story is told of the little boy. He's talking to his daddy, and he says that, "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be an alcoholic." And his father says, "Son, you can't do both." So whether they're drinking or not, if you're a high school teacher, you're surrounded by people who act like alcoholics, and it's very easy to get played. Emergencies and drama, and emergencies and drama, and chaos and drama, and more emergencies, and they keep changing, and everything's unpredictable. And I loved being a teacher, but you can get worn out. The same thing happens to nurses. You love being a nurse, but you get worn out because you don't know anything about self-care. And my first couple of years as a high school teacher, I was 24, 25, 26 years old, nothing but energy. And I didn't need to sleep, and I didn't need to do anything. I could just be very much involved with my students 7 days a week. And it was fun, but you get tired. So by the time I was in the classroom 6, 7, 8 years, I was exhausted. And I didn't have the self-care skills, which means I start overreacting to idiocy. You need to do this for 5 or 10 years before you're really ready for Al-Anon. You want to let the idiots play you. You want to chase after them. You want to talk to them. You want to listen with them until you are as crazy as you could be without being locked up. And then you might be ready to hear about Al-Anon, add 4 more years, and you can join Al-Anon. But it's really an important thing for survival. Anyway, I'm with this group in San Bernardino teaching Monday to Friday, and a man was talking. And his wife was the alcoholic. And he was an Al-Anon member. And here's what I heard this older man say. I was about 35. He said, in Al-Anon, I learn how to live with a crazy person and not go crazy. It took my breath away. Because I didn't know you had a choice. I thought part of the deal was being crazy all the time. Crazy, upset, exhausted, another crisis. Crazy, upset, exhausted, another crisis. And I like that. I was ordained a priest in 1978 and sober a couple years. And I'm a teacher most of the time, but I worked in a parish in downtown Hollywood and the Church of the Blessed Sacrament. Now, it's open all the time, and we had a staff working there, and a lot went on in the parish. There were services every day, a couple times a day, and there were emergencies, and there were troubles, and there were problems, and there was, this is 1978, 79, chaos. This is before, you should compare. And I became overwhelmed. I mean, the phone rang all the time. There was emergencies all the time. One of our leaders decided to let crazy people out of the insane asylums if they promised to take their meds. So several of them lived in the parking lot. One of them was the Archangel Gabriel. And he was usually nonviolent, you know. But there was a lot going on. And you're on duty, like it's like being a doctor. So 24 hours on, and you're number one. The phone rings, you pick it up, and there's 3 hospitals in the area, and whew. So I'm on duty, and the phone rings. Down the street on like Sunset and Highland, they had a little hotel that had hourly rates. And we put some homeless, some families we put up there because it was safe and it was clean, you know, and we paid the daily rate, but they had that's an hourly rate. So there we were, and the guy behind the desk, his name was Buck Love. That's really true. His name was Buck Love. So tattoos, and we talked a bit. Well, the phone rang. It was about 2 a.m, and one of the girls got stabbed really badly, beaten up by her gentleman companion, and she wanted the priest, and I was there within minutes. I was there, and there were police and ambulances, and I went into the room. There were mirrors on the ceiling. I'd never seen that before, and she was still alive, and I prayed over her and did what I could do, and thought I would ride in the ambulance to the hospital, and they said, that's only in the movies, and I said, but this is Hollywood. They didn't believe me. So I went back to the parish, and I shook with adrenaline for 4 days. I was high. Now, to every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and if you have been infused with adrenaline, you will have down days. I mean, up and down and up and down. And I was on that cycle for a long time. So when I heard that man talk about living with a crazy person and not going crazy, I knew one of my crazinesses was the need for excitement and the need for adrenaline and the fact that I was exhausted. And let me add to the mix, angry. If you're helpful and helpful and helpful and helpful and understanding and helpful, and they don't care, you get mad. And I became the angriest teacher on the faculty. I think I became the most certifiable crazy person teaching those kids that year, because I was angry all the time. They were being kids, and you can't react as if they were kids. You have to be. One of the first slogans I heard that saved my life was the one that said, "Act, don't react. Act, don't react." And I was busy reacting to everything, and that created deep personal problems for me. And I'm now nearing 40, and what am I going to do? So I talked to my sponsor, who also was the adult child of an alcoholic. My sponsor was 5 years old when his father died in detox, having choked on his own vomit and died. And he grew up without a daddy because of alcoholism. So we could have a couple of conversations. And I went to a meeting in Los Angeles. Every meeting's different. When someone's coming into Al-Anon, we say try 6 different meetings. There's a good chance you're not going to like any of them. Find 6 more. People ask me, I'm looking for a good Al-Anon meeting, and I tell them there are no good Al-Anon meetings. You have to find one and make it good so you have a place. It's really tough to find a room of people who are safe and friendly and warm, and we're so glad to see you, and let's help each other get back on our feet. I mean, that's the ideal thing, but we're all pretty nuts. One of my little problems with Al-Anon is usually there's about 45 minutes of readings before anyone says anything. I'm glad we didn't do that tonight. Because when you're there with a revolver in your pocket, you don't need to hear, would anyone like to talk about gratitude? So that's just me. So act, don't react, act, don't react. So I go to this meeting, and there are meetings all over Los Angeles. And this meeting was mostly women, and a couple of men sat in the back, one of whom was the father of a student I taught, and he was there because of the kid. Even in the late 70s, early 80s, parents were joining Al-Anon because they had children and grandchildren out of control. So there was a woman who was running the meeting, and she had been secretary, I think, since Truman's second administration. This was not a meeting that rotated leadership. She was smart and she was savvy. She was kind of like Martha Stewart, Heloise. She had answers for everybody. And they read the hour and a half of reading that we do at Al-Anon, and then they would present her with problems. And she would solve them. Now, I know some of you would like to go to that meeting, or start one like that here, and we get to be the queen bee running everything. Again, on her behalf, I think for a lot of people she was very, very helpful, but it's not Al-Anon. We don't do that in Al-Anon. That's the craziness. Giving advice to people you just met about things you don't understand. I have done that compulsively my whole life. I have practiced medicine without a license because I was just trying to be helpful. Years ago, I was at the Jesuit novitiate. I was visiting, and one of the novices, this young man, was feeling really ill with alcohol, feeling really ill with the flu, and I recommended alcohol right out of the bottle. Drink a bottle, go to bed, you'll be fine. This is called practicing medicine without a license. It's also active alcoholism, just so you know, and this is what alcoholics do. So I try not to do that. Anyway, I went to that meeting a couple of times, but I found this. There wasn't a lot of oxygen to breathe in that room. You got to find places where you're nourished and places where you can breathe. And her control was just a little bit too tight. We'll even say this in the literature. We don't give advice. We share our experience. And when we're in our right minds, we don't tell people what they should do. So whether you should stay or leave, I have no idea. Here's what happened for me. I'm having trouble with this. Well, here's some people who've had in a similar situation. Alcoholic children, what do we do with grandchildren? Or alcoholic, children. What do we do? Well, talk to grandparents. They know. But I don't know what you should do. One piece of advice I did give, there were 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 boys. The oldest one was 14. And Daddy loved guns. Loved guns. And I suggested that they keep the bullets somewhere else. Other than that, I haven't given a lot of advice because I don't know anything. But they said, it's fine because the guns are locked away in the cabinet. 2 weeks later, one of the older boys got a hatchet and broke down the door and grabbed a gun and started chasing Dad, but the bullets weren't there. How did you know? Well, college graduate. I've watched Jerry Springer. I know how this works, So I had to find another meeting that practiced the traditions. And we always read the traditions, but it's the common welfare coming first and rotating leadership. And we try to welcome families and family members, and we're trying to get you back on your feet. And we're sure glad to see you. And take all the time you need. And then life changed and my job changed and I moved and I stopped going to Al-Anon for a while. And I left high school teaching and I went into social work. Nurses, social workers, teachers, clergy, police officers, members of the United States Marine Corps. We are helping professions, and an awful lot of us are right out of alcoholic homes. So here are a few things I've had to learn. Act, don't react. I sure reacted to my mom and dad. We played lots of games for which there was no name. Funny dances, funny routines, but not funny, amusing, funny, bizarre. Finally, I would go home for Christmas, as my parents were much older. And I would bring a friend or two with. That's always a good strategy. Bring a friend. They got along with my parents much better than I did. And one of my friends is a psychologist. And so Christmas Eve, and we were driving back to Oakland, and I said, "So what'd you think?" Analyze the family. And her response was, "You make your mother very nervous." And that had never occurred to me, that I would make my mother nervous. She drove me crazy. But it never occurred to me that I made her nervous. And so I began watching my behavior, and I began doing this better in terms of relationships and not being such a jerk, not being such a knee-jerk jerk. And learning to be a bit kind and a bit generous and a bit helpful. But it still takes me right to the edge. My dad died. He was in his early 90s, and thank you, Al-Anon. I was able to be with him in a humane way for his last few years. We don't agree on anything, and we'd get involved in stupid arguments that had been going on for a long time. I know your families aren't like that. This is an Al-Anon slogan I heard in Southern California. I don't think it's in the literature yet, but it should be. And this particular slogan was told me by a priest named John G., who's a Al-Anon and AA guy, former Navy chaplain. And he said, don't take the bait. Alcoholics look confused when they hear that. They don't know what you're talking about. But we in Al-Anon who take the bait understand this. And it was, something gets said and you're supposed to respond, and then someone responds more angrily, and then something gets thrown. And this is how Christmas trees end up on the front lawn on December 25th, and how turkeys are thrown out, of places, So my dad's dying, and he hospice care, and I would drive down to San Jose and spend the nights with him. Thank you, Al-Anon. And I could do some massage on his hands and feet. I'd had a little bit of training there, and be with him. And we didn't have much to say to each other, but I could be there. And he got diagnosed as terminal. Prostate cancer, which will take you out if nothing else does if you're a male. And so we knew that, and make him comfortable, let him go. So my mom would show up about 11 o'clock in the morning, and they'd have lunch, and then I'd drive back to Oakland. And so there we were, and I just visited with my mom a little bit, because she is my mother, so that's my own particular tango. But she's a woman who's losing her husband of many years, and pastorally I know this is a big deal. So put the son thing aside for just a little bit, and don't be a jerk, and let your mom be. So I use some of the skills I've developed, and that I could do with anybody else's family, but not mine, So there I was, and they brought in lunch. And it was some kind of soupy thing, and some kind of proteiny thing, maybe some rice, not quite sure, and some ice cream. And my dad reached for the ice cream. And my mom said to him, soup first. And my first thought was to scream at the top of my lungs, he's dying. Can't he have ice cream first once before he dies? But I've been going to Al-Anon for quite a while, and I heard this in Orange County. Every year of recovery gives you one more second of response time. I mean, that's the big difference between your first couple of years and 10, 20, 30 years in Al-Anon. And the good news, I did not have to say the first thing that occurred, breathe, breathe, breathe. And another Al-Anon slogan came up in about 5 or 8 seconds. And that was this. I said to my mom, I'll be right back. And then I went out to the hallway. And I didn't scream, but I sure had a reaction of just outrage and all those other things. And I did a little bit of aerobic exercise there in the hallway for a few moments. And then I was back, and I was able to be there for these 2 elderly people who were losing each other. Thank you, Al-Anon. It never would have occurred to me to do it that way, because I have seen Jerry Springer, and I know that that's when you drag your dad out of the bed and take him to Las Vegas for his last weekend. we learn a lot about relationships, and when we come into recovery, a lot of times we rebuild our families. We develop new families, and I do that. I like that a lot. I think the graduate work is reconnecting with family. And there are some people I can do something for, and there are some people I can't do much for. But I'm in charge of my side of the street. Not them, my side of the street. So I try not to be a jerk one day at a time. I heard this. I was very, very new in recovery, and one of the members of my community in Los Angeles, he said, "Tom, you handle strangers really well, but the way you talk about your family is an embarrassment. You're really mean." And they were right. I had all this anger and upset and hurt feelings, and whenever I was connected with the family, that's what came up for me, and I had to do some step work on that. I had to realize I was powerless and unmanageable of the past. I had to let go of things. I had to do a couple of inventories. I had to ask God for help. I had to learn how to act rather than react, and to not take the bait as it was offered. Towards the end of my folks' lives, we had an election, and we don't talk political stuff in Al-Anon and religious stuff because it makes us crazy, but I can tell you a little bit about my own recovery. And the results were in, and I took my folks to Spanger's in Berkeley, which is a great fish restaurant. And my mom just said, "So what'd you think?" meaning about the election. And I was able to calmly say what I thought, and they just listened, and then we ordered something from the menu. Instead of throwing, screaming, yelling, shouting, communist, Bolshevik, stuff like that. That's not helpful. Fascist. Those words don't help family dialogue. So here's a few things I've learned in Al-Anon that I find very helpful. I like the Serenity Prayer, and I use it. There's lots of good prayers out there. Find a couple that make sense to you. One of my friends wrote a book on prayer, and it's entitled, "Help! Thanks. Wow." And those are 3 pretty good prayers if you want to use them. They also have ones that are much more involved. But help, thanks, wow. Help, I asked for help this morning before I left my room. There's a lot of moving parts. Things can go wrong. Help, thanks, wow. So the Serenity Prayer. I used to think that the Serenity Prayer was for people who were upset all the time. And the prayer was, calm me down, make me serene, unplug the plug. It's all about me. And that's not the prayer at all. Give me some serenity, because I have decisions to make. Grown-ups make decisions. I am not a victim. I get to make choices. And when is it a good time to make decisions? Not when you're drunk. Try to remember that. Not when you're drunk. Not if you just smoke some crystal meth. That's not really a good time for decisions. Not if you're suddenly in love. I love you. What's your name? You may as well have done a line of cocaine, just before talking. That's not the time. You want to be in a middle place. You want some serenity. You don't want to be too high or too low. And so sometimes you need a couple of days to get serene before you can make decisions. And that's why some people go on retreats and stuff like that. In my own tradition in the Jesuit community, that's one of our focuses on how to focus and get rid of things that distract you and then make some decisions. So give me some serenity, because I've got to decide some stuff. There's some stuff I cannot change. And as an older person, I don't have energy to waste. I get tired more quickly. I bounce back more slowly. That has to go into every equation. So I don't want to waste energy on stuff that is not going to change. Here are 3 things that I cannot change. I cannot change the past. I cannot change the truth. And I cannot change you. I mean, that frees up the whole day. You know? For those of us who've been trying to manipulate and finesse and control, which is our drug. If I just controlled it, everything would be fine. Insanity. One of my friends said, "So what's the truth?" What's the truth? And I said, how about the laws of physics, gravity, space, and time? Why don't we start with those? Oh, those. One of my sponsees is theoretically a bright person. She tests well. But at the age of 60, she climbed on her roof to get the leaves off. This is really dumb. This is really dumb. It's for 23-year-olds, And she fell off, and she broke all kinds of things. And I just said, you just proved gravity one more time. Now, do you need to test it again? Gravity doesn't care if your heart is pure. It will suck you down. I watch TV. There's a television character named Monk. Monk is the obsessive compulsive detective. I think he's hilarious. And he's very worried about everything. And I always love to see someone who worries more than I do. But he's germ phobic and all these things. And I'm not that much, but a little. And a bunch of young people were visiting him in his house, and as they left, Monk said to them, "Be careful, there's a lot of gravity out there." And I think we should end Al-Anon meetings with that little phrase. There's a lot of gravity out there, be careful. And space and time, and the laws of physics. Those are things I need to pay attention to, and sometimes I don't, and there are consequences. I rented a car in Los Angeles, and I was driving around, and I wanted to turn left, and they were not letting me. So I thought I'd go anyway. And the laws of physics applied. I smacked into this other guy. No one was hurt. But how stupid is this? I'm a grown-up person, and I just did this. And I brought the car back to AAA, or to whoever that was, Hertz or one of those places. And I just said, there was an accident, and they said, whose fault was it? And I said, 100% mine. And they said, excuse me, I don't think they ever heard anybody say that before. 100% mine. And it was a very expensive proof that the laws of physics apply. My goodness. So can't change the past, can't change the truth, and I can't change you. What can I change? Here are 3 things that I can change. I can change my thinking. I can change my behavior. And I can change my attitudes. That's what I can change. And I think that's the focus of the 12 steps. What really got me into Al-Anon wasn't so much meetings. I mean, I was blowing hot and cold on meetings. But talks that people give. A good Al-Anon talk, a good AA talk, you listen to it over and over and over again. And one of my friends from Tahoe, a woman named Sally, who was an Al-Anon person, gave me a cassette tape of a woman named Blanche from Permian Basin High School in West Texas. And Blanche was a teacher and taught English there at Permian Basin. If you ever saw a TV show called Friday Night Lights, that's her school. All those kids and all those people, that's where she taught forever. And it's a very special part of North America. It's unique there. It's like Louisiana is like nothing else. It's like Alaska is like nothing else. So I listened to her, and 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 here's a few things I heard, and these did get me in the Al-Anon door. She said, in Al-Anon, I learned how to keep my sails out of other people's wind. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot of wind blowing. And a lot of it is none of my business. I mean, some is, but a lot of it is none of my business. And I used to think if I was going to be close to somebody, I had to get caught up in all their drama. That was part of the excitement and the adrenaline. And I had an awful lot of friends who always had emergencies. And when they didn't have emergencies any longer, I dropped them as friends. That was a pattern that took me almost 10 years to notice. Can you just have friends you hang out with? No, I have to drive them to emergency, and then I know we're close. No. Just to be friends. And Blanche also said, babies are dependent. They need ever so much. And adolescents are independent. Leave them alone. And grown-ups are interdependent. My turn, your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn. And I want to live as a grown-up. I have developed friends over the years, and I know, for an example, if they come to visit me, it means I need to go visit them. That's part of the deal. To be inconvenienced, talking and listening and talking and listening and talking and listening as part of a friendship thing. So Blanche also said when she was growing up in northern Florida, she heard, what you don't know can't hurt you. And she said, that's not true. What I did not know about alcoholism almost killed 4 people. So part of Al-Anon recovery is getting an education, an ongoing education about how the disease works and how recovery works. I led a weekend a couple years ago. It was for members of Al-Anon in somewhere in New York. And I knew a couple of the women there, and it was going to be a nice weekend. And then Saturday mornings, I have a chance to visit with people one-on-one. And a lady came in, and she said, if I had known you were an alcoholic, I would never have come here. And I said, why? She said, alcoholics ruined my family, destroyed my life, and destroyed the life of my children, and I hate you. Okay, now, act, don't react, act, don't react, act, don't react, Because it would have been very easy to be a jerk. And we talked a little, and I did not get defensive. Don't push back. Listen, and I got a little bit of her story, and I said, how long have you been coming to Al-Anon? And she said, 9 years. And I almost said, have you heard anything? But I didn't, because that's not helpful. I told her if she wanted to go home, she was free to do that, but she was welcome to spend the weekend and see if there was anything she could pick up. And we had a couple of meals together, and she didn't stamp out. But she sure had an awful lot of hurt and bile that needed to go somewhere. And that's true. Learning about the disease and learning, as my sponsor learned about his daddy, he was a sick man, not a bad man. A sick man, not a bad man. So I heard this, and Dr. Silkworth talks about alcoholism as being an allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. That's helpful. That paints a picture. I got that. And my friend Dr. Gil Ayat, who was sober for a very long time, Gil talks about alcoholism as being a disease with 3 phases. Phase 1 is the fun phase. Phase 2 is fun plus problems, and phase 3 is problems. And step 1 asks the question, are you still having any fun? And if you are, you're not going to join. You have to have the gift of desperation to find us interesting. When I share at an AA meeting, I oftentimes mention I go to Al-Anon because of my anger and my exhaustion stuff, which still comes up. I mean, I was at a meeting and I mentioned that I still get angry. I'm surrounded by fools. I mean, I get angry. And a person there said, if you were really spiritual, you'd never get angry. And each year of recovery gives you a second of response time. And I waited for a little while, and then I said, that's very helpful. Which is sarcasm, by the way. I think she missed it. But I do get angry, and I get worn out, and I get a daily reprieve from the worst of my crazy, all that. So anyway, I usually mention at an AA meeting that I go to Al-Anon because I didn't want to be a sober person shooting people. And this lady came up to me and she said, I'm 7 years sober and I hate everybody. Should I start going to Al-Anon? And my suggestion was to hold out as long as you can. You don't want to get here too soon, because you'll compare. You'll say, oh, no, people knitting, I can't go back. Police officers holding stuffed animals, I can't go back, Marines knitting, I can't go back. And then, but if you're desperate enough, you're just so glad to be there, with all these odd folks who have issues, So I was told this, and this is my last 5 minutes. Alcoholism is a lot like dancing with a gorilla. You're not done dancing until the gorilla is done dancing. If the gorilla has his arms around you, the gorilla is making the decisions. And when I first heard that story, they didn't say dancing. They said dating. And they didn't say dating. But you get the idea of a very busy gorilla, Now, the gorilla sure kills a lot of people. It kills a lot of people. One of my neighbors, he's a periodic, and he goes to meetings, and he's sober, and then he drinks, and he gets in fights and breaks arms, and he's been in a coma for 2 months from his last bout of riding bicycles drunk and smacking his head. I mean, this is tragedy. This is a deadly disease. The gorilla is a very powerful and deadly partner. If you're clean and sober today, it means the gorilla let go. Doesn't mean you outsmarted it. It just is taking a little breather. And if the gorilla has let go, get out of the cage. And don't go back into the cage even when the gorilla starts humming your song, because it will. Oh, I'll never do that. No, so disgusting, awful. Broke everyone's heart, jail, goats. No. I'm not going to do that again. Front page of the paper, I was so humiliated on that. And then the moon's full, and you're a little restless, and a really cute gorilla walks by. And I find some gorillas compelling, let me tell you. I have to be very careful on this. One of my pals in Vegas says he doesn't want to dance with the gorilla, but every so often he wants to pet it just a little bit. Now, we who love alcoholics and addicts, I mean, they're cute and they're funny. We who love alcoholics and addicts visit the zoo a lot. And we walk around and we see lions and tigers and bears. And we see all these interesting things. And then we walk by the gorilla cage and we see the person we love with the gorilla. Might be your mom or dad. That's tough. Might be your brother or sister. That's tough. Might be your spouse. I have never been married. I have never been married to an alcoholic. I have never wanted to be married to an alcoholic. What's wrong with you people? That's what I think. It might be one of your kids or grandkids. Now, all of those are different conversations. And all of those are different levels of terror, especially kids and grandkids. And the only person who understands what you're living with, if it's your son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter who's out there, is another parent. They know. I gave a talk in San Leandro, and this lady came up, a lady of a certain age. She had a little girl with her. And again, college graduate here, grandmother, granddaughter, I could figure that out. And she said, I have to talk to you. And I said, about what? My daughter's out there. Well, why talk to me? I don't have a daughter out there. I've read the book and I've seen the movie, but that's not enough, So I said, just a minute. And then I said, how many people here have a daughter or a son who's out there? And a dozen people raised their hands. I said, get their phone numbers. They understand. I don't. Talk to someone who's been there. So we walk by the gorilla cage. We see the gorilla with the person we love. We want to take action. So we get into the cage. And we start vacuuming and sweeping. Move the furniture so the feng shui is right. This is the West Coast after all. Hang a picture of the Dalai Lama, some Chinese poetry. None of that helps. And then nice vegetarian meals. Doesn't help. So then we try to get between the gorilla and the person we love. And the gorilla turns on us and yanks our arms and legs off. There are very high casualty rates for those of us who love alcoholics and addicts, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Boy, we get run ragged. So we have a program, and it's called Al-Anon. And a lot of the Al-Anon program comes down to this. Stay out of the cage. Let's all say that together. Stay out of the cage. But I only want to sweep and vacuum. We know. Makes everyone crazy when you do that. We're meeting over by the giraffes. And we're going to have a conversation about our need to vacuum and sweep other people's cages. One of my friends who knows things and gets involved in symbols and symbolism, he says the giraffe is the symbol of nonviolent communication. So that might be a good Al-Anon mascot if we're looking for one. I carry one with me just in case, little one, but to remind me. Every 5 years, Al-Anon has an international convention, July 4th weekend, and this year it's in Baltimore, Maryland. and you can go online tonight and sign up for it. It's something you could do. It's an invitation, but it might be really a wonderful experience. I'm so glad to be here tonight in Reno. Thank you for your kind attention. If there's anything I've said that's useful, please use it. And if it's not useful, don't worry about it. And if nothing else, you know why I need to stay in connection with Al-Anon one day at a time. Thanks so much.